And then just to let you know, Reverend Angela is going to begin her talk and meditation will follow.
So what a lovely space. Here we are in this virtual world. And for many, it is a blessing who live far away or who have some challenge or other to not be able to be in the space. And at the same time, some of us are longing to touch one another physically and hug one another. And so we allow all of that to be in this space as we embrace all of it lovingly with kindness and gentleness. So last week, we began a series on intuition. What does it mean to live from the flow of our divine intuition? We spent quite a bit of time exploring what intuition is and what it is not, looking at some of the common misperceptions around intuition, that it might just be what some people are talented in, like people who hang a shingle, who are mediums, who are tarot card readers, or aura readers, psychics, so on and so on. But we know and affirm that each one of us has in us the innate ability to intuit, to receive that direct divine knowing, that download. And so what I would like to do today is to just briefly summarize some points we look at just within maybe 2 slides, looking at the Charles Fillmore's definition of intuition, Kim Chesney's brief definition. And then we are going to look at how does intuition show up in our lives? Like, what does it look like out picturing in the different aspects of our lives? And then we're going to look at starting to look at the gateway, the process of intuition. In some ways you might be exploring, and for others, it's that invitation to begin to flow from that place in our lives. So here we go. Charles Fillmore, who is the co-founder of the Unity movement. He explained the process of intuiting as divine knowing. It is a function of our consciousness where we receive that direct download of divine ideas from universal mind. Universal mind could be divine mind, AKA God, AKA infinite potential, mysterious substance and breath of life, great spirit, so on and so on. So according to Charles Fillmore, there are 4 functions of consciousness. So we are both human and divine. So from our human consciousness and human mind, the functions of our 5 sensing, our sensing modalities, where we take in the world through our senses and our sensations. Then we have the intellectual mind, our thinking process. That is the analysis mind, where we look at the facts. And it is also from our humanness, it is the rational mind. And then we have our feeling nature, our rich emotions of love, of hope, of hopelessness, of sadness, of fear. And we know that all of that has information for us, and that through the power of our feelings, when we claim our dominion, we can also energize what we are holding in thought. But we go to the function of consciousness, the 4th function of consciousness that Charles Fillmore names. It is the power of intuiting. It is that aspect of consciousness that is beyond our intellectual mind, where we begin to gleam and claim our oneness in the universal mind, in God, where we get those downloads of insight. So Kim Chesney, who is an author of Radical Intuition, which I'll be drawing a lot of our material from, she is a modern day teacher, spiritual teacher on this subject. So her wording may be different, but basically she's saying the same thing as Charles Fillmore, that it is an advanced faculty of our cognition where we access that from our super consciousness. That aspect of intuiting comes from the synchronization we know in science of when we reside in the frontal lobe, in that place of divine mind, where we tap into, when we synchronize our heart breathing, because we know that our wisdom comes from all aspects of our being, but especially in the power of our wise heart, not our emotional heart, but when we do that synchronized deep breathing. It is our divine GPS in our world. And when we allow ourselves to flow from that place, we are empowered. We are empowered to live from our divine nature, from our authentic selves, and our path unfolds in a way that makes us feel most alive in our lives. And Kim Chesney brings us into understanding that intuition is a multifaceted process. And so I hope to start to explore that today. And as I said in the beginning of as I started us off this morning, that our goal today would be to look at, right? I'm going to share some examples that Kim Chesney shares with us, and some that I put there for my own, that how does life out pictures in different areas of our lives when we are intuiting, when we are living from that place of our divine intuition, versus when we are just into the human mind of our letting our senses guide everything, just letting the intellectual mind guide us, and our emotional feelings when we are reacting. So we're going to look at that, and then we're going to move into the process. And we begin the process of deepening our intuiting by being mindful and insightful. They are complementary forces in our practice. And so let us look at, on the left, we have when we are aligned from that place of intuition versus when we are flowing from our human intellectual mind, our emotional senses, or physical senses, reacting by what we see, smell, taste, touch, and then we have a thought, a conditioned thought of how it should be. So I'm going to read these examples of these different aspects of our lives, and then after each, we're going to take it in with our intellectual mind. I'm going to have you pause, perhaps close your eyes, and see what insight comes to you about this area of your life and where you find yourself. So first, we start off with relationships, our rich relationships. So when we are flowing from that space of divine intuition, two people are aligned and energetically support each other's growth and happiness, right? It's not this enmeshment, this me and this mine. And then when we are flowing from our conditioned selves, our human mind, our personality selves, the way my mother and father were or were not, or partners were, so on and so on, two people choose to be together based on social norms, on convenience, on expectations that don't align with each other's authentic path. So just take that moment. So what are you discovering, knowing about you and your relationships? Perhaps some are flowing from this space of divine honoring and intuiting, and perhaps in others, maybe you find yourself more into your human aspect. Just notice what arises, what insight. Now we look at business. Example of flowing from divine creativity and originality, gleaming that divine idea. Apple becomes a global innovative leader by creating intuitive new products the world has never seen. And then from the business, from our human intellectual societal norms, you'll see on the right, it's a lot of societal norming. What we learn, what we are conditioned to be in this world that represents. So less successful companies try to stay relevant by following trends instead of setting and creating them. What are they doing over here in this business? What are they doing here in this spiritual community? Yes, there are good practices, but what is wanting to percolate here? So just take that moment. What are you noticing for yourself in your work? And now we move into wellness. A person listens to their body and eats clean, healthy diet based on the nudges from their inner guidance. What a novel idea. Versus following the latest trend, Atkins, keto, paleo, vegan. Now, one of those may resonate with you, but is it resonating with your body and your being? So let us take a moment. I mean, that's just one example in the area of wellness. Let's just take this moment to pause. And what do you notice about wellness for you? What place might you be flowing from? Let me move into creativity. Example would be great artists like Cezanne, Picasso, and Warhol use their intuition to revolutionize world culture, things that have never been seen and created before. Then when we're flowing from societal norms or just our intellect, our personality self, artists struggle to succeed following the formulas of others instead of their own extraordinary vision. How did so-and-so do it? Let me replicate that, so on and so on. Knowing that each one of us, even though we are all divine, we are all connected, but each one of us is a unique expression. What is my way of uniquely expressing? And so we take this moment in the pause of what are you noticing in the area of creativity in your life? Spirituality, saints, gurus, masters attain the highest level of consciousness by intuitively connecting with life. Many of the great teachers, masters were rebels, right? Jesus often spoke about it is not about the letter of the law or religious law. It is about living from the kingdom of God, which is that divine mind, the realm of ideas where we have that connection to all that is and listening to what is mine to express in this moment. And then in spirituality, we look at meditation formulas, not that they're not helpful, but we find us going through the motion of some of these practices, but not in the authentic. We don't feel that we may get a little bit of peace in this, but do we look for the answers from the gurus, or do we allow those answers to come from within? And so let us just take that moment to notice what is up for us in spirituality. So when we are aligned and living a good portion of our day from that flow of intuition rather than our societal condition, personality, our five senses, human mind, we experience authenticity, confidence. We have a sense of inner reassurance, calm, centered, despite what might be going on. We are personally evolving and growing, and we are focused on purpose and centered in the moment, one step at a time. And so when we are in that flow, because we're always flowing with something, because we are vibrational beings, but when we are allowing our five senses, our conditioned mind, our personality selves, the way our spouse wants things, or what will somebody think or not think, it's not possible, because if I can't feel it, taste it, touch it, if I don't know how it's going to outpicture in my life, I'm not taking that first step. So we might feel confused, fearful, anxious, stressed, stagnant. Like, I can tell you the same thing is happening today that had happened a year ago, possibly. Indecisiveness, unfocused, loss. And rather being centered in the moment, focused on purpose, there is this drivenness, forcefulness, got to get it all done. So the sense of purpose coming from our place of intuition, we may be from this wanting to make a difference, wanting to, for me, what's most alive, how does spiritual truth awaken, empower, and transform lives, right? So I shared last week that when I was in prayer with my spiritual director, I had a download, an intuitive moment where I had this come to me about writing a book. So now we are both human and divine. So I'm in this heightened state and I'm like beautiful and I'm crying. And then later on, when I'm just doing my, every day, going through the day, and maybe not from that centered place, I'm like, that's crazy, and then that fear may come up. But if I keep going back to breathing into that, and then I bring that, why is that? It's not because I want to be a famous author. It's not because I want to make lots of money, although making lots of money would be empowering for me to do good things in this world. It came from this prayer around, how many teachings are there in unity around navigating in the void and the deconstruction death process. We talk about the death, the crucifixion, being in the tomb, and then new life. And lots of us want to jump to the affirmations and where's the new life? But how do we, navigate that? And I have no idea when this will be, how it will be, but it's okay, And then today in meditation, I got the beauty in the valley of the shadow of death, or the shadow of darkness. I have no idea what that is, but when I go back into my everyday thinking of saying, how could I get that? The human mind would say, how can I get that done? You don't have time for that. You're not an author. Step by step, moment by moment. Who knows? This may be 10 years away. That's not what's up. But when we're in that divine intuiting process, we know that it is a gentle, it may be sometimes scary, but we get what we need in that moment if we ask, not to make it happen, to force something to happen, but to be in the moment by moment awareness. So as we can see here, when we are living from that intuitive flow of divine inspiration, we are empowered, right? Because we are tuned in, tapped into spiritual consciousness. We are tuned in, tapped into our desires, and that lift off comes from being, through our power of love, living from our divine nature, from the highest possible aspect in consciousness. So let us take this moment to pause together. First thing I'd like to ask, if somebody would like to put in the chat, what personal connections have you made after looking at those two charts? Well, anybody want to share a personal connection that you have made for yourself? So let me, how many of you found areas where you were flowing from the intuitive flow and areas where maybe you're doing more flowing from the human mind consciousness? Anybody find that? Just here. Okay, so Joy says that she has a mix of both. Well, I would find that to be a common thing because we are human and divine. And I think part of this whole process that we are exploring, both, Steve, is for us to embrace our humanity, but to increase the amount of time we are flowing. You know, today I'm going to talk about mindfulness, that is the gateway into insight. And I'm going to talk a little bit about meditation, but it is that call for us to have that insight in the everyday moments of our life. Okay, so then the next thing is, what do you think impacts our ability, your ability, my ability, society's ability to live from the flow of our intuition? Marie much prefer the intuitive side, so much more peaceful. Amen. Outside success impacts me. Yes. And, you know, I like to speak to that, Alyssa. To live intuitively means that we are honoring the inner voice rather than the voice of the world. How many of us have so many voices? People we think we need to make happy. Our boss, if I don't do it this way or that way, will I lose my job? So on and so on. And so sometimes we may find ourselves in that voice of the world, in that process of dying, or that deconstruction in our lives. Oh my God, if I step into this, what might I lose? Will I lose financial security? If I follow the guidance to leave this job? If I decide to step into speaking up or authentically, you know, who might not like it in my world and might decide to leave, right? Those are all things that are real for us as we navigate, you know, as we navigate between the human and our divinity and our humanity. And Karen says, yes, both. And I can really relate as an author to what you said, remembering to do that breath work and live, and to live from the inside out. Need to make sure I have substantial daily diet of spirit time. I love that language. Yes, that impacts us, right? You know, when we look at the masters and the teachers, the masters of spiritual truth, you know, Myrtle Fillmore, you know, who healed her body of tuberculosis, she spent a good portion of her day, yes, in prayer, but she also forgiving her body. She was conscious of how she was talking to people, what words she allowed to vibrate in her being and out through her mouth. And so then, you know, that's that process where we can say, okay, I'm here, and how can I engage this practice of being mindful and insightful and expand it? You know, what ways can I do that? And we start right where we are. So that leads us into what the process, starting to look at what the process, the multifaceted process of intuition. And Kim Chesney shares that, we like to, in the world of duality, see things as separate, or maybe that they're against this. Is our human body against our spirit, like where we sometimes believe, like, let's not, like, our humanity is not spiritual. Yeah, everything is of the divine. And so instead of living in those dualities, it is the call of oneness and looking at things as being aspects of this, of two things that, or not two things, aspects, and how things complement each other. So she states that intelligence, or human mind, and intuition are two sides of a coin. And when they can work together, we don't have to like curse one. They create an extraordinary mind. We go to school to get smarter, right? Why shouldn't we go to school to become more intuitive? Now, the answers are within. So I just invite you to allow this time through the series for this to be the spiritual lab of exploring and gaining more insight into the process of intuition. So this process of intuitive sight, intuitive knowing, not only are intellect and intuition two aspects, complementary aspects, but so is mindfulness and insight. How often do we stop at thinking mindfulness, being present in the moment, is just the end, the destination, instead of it being part of the flow and process of being present and then gleaming insight? And so I thought it would be nice, because everybody comes from different backgrounds, different understandings, if we just do a short review about mindfulness. And I thought it would be so honoring and appropriate, knowing that Thich Nhat Hanh had passed from this earthly plane, I believe just yesterday. He was 95 years old, 95 years young, and he is in the next phase of his living. But he brought so much to this, to our understanding about mindfulness. And so he shares, mindfulness is the act of bringing one's full attention to what is happening in the present moment. Not yesterday, not what's happening tomorrow, not what's happening, what I'm going to eat after we're done, but what is in this present moment. We bring our minds back to our bodies and come home to the present moment. It begins with mindful awareness of our breathing, our in-breath and our out-breath. Mindfulness is the kind of energy that helps us to be fully present, to live life in the here and the now. So we just energize our hearts with love and blessings and gratitude for all of the teachings, and how impactful the soul of Thich Nhat Hanh has been in our lives and in the world. Then we look at Robert Brummett, a Unity minister, author of many books, one of which we just did maybe a year ago, a series on, Living Originally. And one of those practices is radical self-awareness, mindfulness. And he defines it as to be aware of my present moment experience by being aware of my mental, emotional, and physical responses. What's going on in the humanness of my beingness and all around me. And then also calls us to be aware of how I am reacting in this moment to what is in my world. And so we can see that mindfulness is the gateway to self-knowledge, to stillness and insight. So self-knowledge, as I am aware of what I am sensing in my body, I can become aware of maybe what it needs. As I am aware of the thoughts that rise, right? I can see, because Charles Fillmore tells us we have a pivotal consciousness. We can pivot outward to the world, and experience our world from our humanness or in our five senses, like I said before. And then there's that pivot within, where we make meaning from within rather than out there. And so when we begin to be aware of our thoughts, we get to choose, okay, is that coming from my personality? Is this coming from a place that's wounded in me? Is this an old story? Or is it from a place of truth, of that divine intuiting? And then if I notice that I am reacting fearful and back in that wounded place of responding to the world, then I can take that breath, become still, and then from that place, then glean that divine insight. So mindfulness is the gateway of being present in the moment. It is the gateway of self-knowledge, and it is also the gateway into the stillness, which we will explore a little bit, where there is no mind, no thought. And in that space is where insight or intuition speaks to us. So let's take a look at those aspects. So stillness, Kim Chesney defines as the quiet space between our thoughts. And Charles Fillmore states that is a state of consciousness entered into for the purpose of putting each person in touch with divine mind or insight, intuiting, so that the soul may listen to the still voice within. An insight is what Charles Fillmore would call a divine idea. When we are in that place of that download, where we are getting something that just comes into our being that is maybe not rational, but it is that insight. In the silence of your quiet mind, sorry about the typo, in the space between thoughts, the voice of intuition arises. And only in the place of no mind can you hear your intuition. The thinking mind can be a bully, monkey mind, we're all aware of that. Or as Michael Singer calls, the roommate. Only when it settles down can your inner wisdom get through to gently touch you. Only in the place of no mind can you hear your intuition. The thinking mind can be a bully, and only when it settles down can your inner wisdom get through to gently touch you. And so one of those ways we can enter into using the practice of mindfulness, and then entering into the stillness, and then entering into presencing, we glean that insight. So there's different forms of meditation. And meditation isn't the only way. There's not one type. There's walking meditations. There's, looking at a flame of a candle. There is just being in the earth. It's going for a ride in nature. But what brings it into the meditative process is where we become aware of what's around us, what's within us, and then we allow for the space between our awareness of no mind. So I just offer this as a practice possibly of meditation for you that we're going to look at this morning, is where we begin to become aware of our body, and we become mindful of our body, and we relax our bodies. We become aware of the sensations. We can become aware of our thoughts, what is going on around us. And then we bring ourselves into concentration, where we pick a mantra or a short prayer or something where we focus. And then we let it lead into stillness, into quiet time.